Okay. The second session will deal with the Druze in Israel, political mobilization and social change. The session will be feature Arabic-English interpretation. The first speaker will be Professor Dina Siegel. I hope that I did pronounce the name correctly. A short biography before starting. Professor Dina Siegel is a professor of criminology and head of the Department of Criminology at Utrecht University. Okay, thank you for correcting me. I will continue from that point. In the Netherlands, she conducted research and published numerous books and articles on organized crime. It's good that you are abroad, including recent books, Siegel, published in 2024, The Israeli Mafia, a cultural journey into Israeli organized crime. It was published by Springer, New York. And there is another book published by Nellen and Professor Siegel, or it's an edited volume published in 2023, Organized Crimes in the 21st Century, Motivation, Opportunities, and Consent, published by the same publisher, Springer, New York. Professor Siegel will present her paper about organized crime and normalization of violence in the Druze villages in the Galilee. The presentation will be held in English. Please. Every speaker will have between 15 and 18 minutes.
Thank you very much, Professor Hazran. I would like to ask Professor Zidan if it's possible to open my PowerPoint presentation, which I sent to him, so it will be easy for me to
multitask.
And in the meantime, of course, I want to thank you for the invitation, especially to Professor Zidan. I'm a professor of criminology, and it is especially meaningful to me to engage in this conference, understanding cultural frameworks from multidisciplinary perspective to grasping how Druze communities navigate justice, conflict, and resilience. Please go to the next slide. So this is indeed a part of my study, which I did on Israeli mafia in Israel and abroad. As I am educated as anthropologist, cultural anthropologist, I studied in Tel Aviv University. So I did ethnographic research, including fieldwork, participant observation, field interviews. I spent a lot of time also in Druze villages, have a lot of respondents from there. I will tell about it a little bit later. And I also did media analysis. This book is full of pictures from different sites. And of course, this was a period of COVID-19, so the whole world went online, and I had to use what we call nethnography or ethnography online to contact my respondents regularly during this period. So this period was between December 2020 and April 2024. However, it continues actually until now, and especially after 8 October and the war, it had some meaningful continuation to look at the involvement of organized crime in this area. Of course, the role of gatekeepers is very important. I do speak Hebrew, but not really Arabic. I do understand Arabic, but I had very good translators and mediators who provided me with a lot of very nice information. There were also obstacles. There was a fear. What does it mean, ethnographic research? Is it a kind of journalism, or do I work for police? So I had to take my time to explain, to convince, and to build trust relationship with my respondents. Please go to the next slide. And today I would like to focus on the following subtopics, especially problematic concepts. We are talking here about criminal clans or criminal families, but what does it mean? Then I will give a kind of a presentation on organized crime in the Galilee, and I will focus specifically on the one study on the criminal Hamula of Abu Latif Abu Latif, and of course to mention the normalization of violence in the villages. So talking about criminal clans, we have to acknowledge that there is no consensus on what does it mean precisely. And in literature, we see a lot of concepts like families, clans, even tribes, which are used interchangeably, and they are not clarifying. They only cause more confusion and misunderstanding. And when I looked at the anthropological roots of clans, then the specific ingredients are obvious. There's blood relatives. The clan can be extended by marriages, and multiple clans form a tribe with a common ancestor, strong ties, a feeling of identity, and common norms and values. And I tried to use an emic language of my respondents. It was very much dependent on specific and regional and situational context in which this term was used. So sometimes it was about belonging, in other cases it was political recruitment, and of course criminal alliance, which was important to my topic. Usually there was talking about Hamula, which traditionally provided protection to each member, but in exchange demanded loyalty and shared duties to the family. Please go to the next one. I will focus today on the Galilee. I did also research in different parts of Israel. I went to the Negev. I was in the center of the country in Jerusalem. But today I will focus on organized crime in the Galilee. I did spend many weeks there being hosted by different Druze families, conducted numerous interviews with representatives of the community, members of Sulha committees. I also talked with businessmen. I talked with lawyers, with ex-convicts. Of course, Galilee is known, a region stretching from the Israeli-Lebanese border in the north, Upper Galilee, to the Akko district, it's a lower Galilee. It underwent significant... It's a lot of...
Yeah, I'm trying to tell you that our language interpreters are having a hard time to follow you because they're speaking too fast. And slow just a little bit for the sake of the Arabic translation. Thank you.
Can I continue? Okay, so Galilee is undergoing significant changes, and I will not go into history because there will be much more presentations in this conference, and my colleagues will present history, geography, and current events in more details. The only thing is, of course, historically Galilee is home to most Muslim Arabs, Druze, and Christian Arabs, and with additional communities including Bedouin, Circassian, and Maronites. They live in small villages, and there is a network of transportation between the mountains connected by a network of roads. Next, okay. Today, the Israeli Druze have official recognition as a separate religious community with its own religious court system, similar to what's happening in Syria, in Jordan, and Lebanon. In 2020, the Druze made up in Israel about 1.6% of population, and majority reside in the Galilee, in Carmel and Golan Heights, in either exclusively Druze areas or mainly in mixed communities with Christian and Muslims. The Druze population in Galilee is growing continuously, but it also continuously facing restrictions on, for example, land ownership and building new houses. There are a lot of unrecognized neighborhoods, parts of the villages and hamlets, which are subject to regular demolitions despite years of negotiations. And as criminologist, I was mainly interested in crime in general and organized crime in Galilee in particular. And when I started my fieldwork, two specific villages were mentioned often in the media about this number of murders, protection record, namely Kafr Yarka and Kafr Nakhv. but especially Kafr Rame was openly linked to one specific criminal clan. And this is a case of Abu Latif Hamula. So the Abu Latif clan is at the core, at which are 5 brothers, and is connected to organized crime for many, many years. And the extended family, of course, includes a lot of academics, lawyers, doctors, accountants who have nothing to do with crime. They have even a city council chair. But Abu Latif Abu Latif, is the head of this clan, whom my respondent described as one of the leading businessmen and one of the leading crime bosses in the Galilee and maybe in whole Israel. His name appeared on the list of the 7 the most influential criminal clans in the country. His business partners are his brothers, Alaa Abu Latif, Salman Abu Latif, who are contractors and businessmen, Louis Abu Latif and Nidal Abu Latif, who are also involved in contracting business. And according to the media reports, the members of the clan do not hesitate to challenge public officials and to enter public projects by intimidating and threatening people they view as obstacles for their interests. So the name Abu Latif is enough to deter competitors. And the extortion racket also provides the clan with huge profits. As one of my respondents told me, they are businessmen, and there are businessmen like Muslim, Christian, Jewish, who are proactively approaching Abu Latif even before they open their businesses, and they factor in the protection fees as part of their business plans, which they include as under the category of security services. So Abu Latif criminal family has also close connections to the Jewish criminal organizations, such as infamous Michael Moore, allegedly even providing shelter to some fugitive members of Moore's criminal organization in their homes. But they, on the other hand, also connected to the rival of Michael Moore, the Jewish crime boss Shmulik Harush. And so they have peace and they have advantages from Jewish criminal organizations from different sides. The name Abu Latif is also used by many smaller gangs, usually with the permission of the bosses, and in return, they are paying fees for using this visit card. Main criminal activities: protection racket under security services, contract killings, eliminating rivals, corruption. So interface between the upper and underworld is not a recent phenomena of organized crime. So the allure of an offer one cannot refuse often entices people to engage in criminal acts, in corrupt relationship, or even to actively participate in criminal enterprises. For example, in April 2023, when I was on my fieldwork, Latif Abu Latif was arrested for extorting contractors and for corruption, where the corruption charges included allegations that he maintained contact with officials from the Israeli Ministry of Defense who had provided him with information about construction plans. And then money laundering. Also in the same period, more than 20 members of his family were arrested, and 30 Lamborghinis and Mercedes-Benz cars, along with hundreds of millions of Israeli shekels cash, were confiscated in a police operation called Black Billion. It was not the only police operation in the last years. And some members who were aware that they became targets for the police fled to Turkey. But the most important feature of this clan is its violent reputation. And I quote here, as you see, one of the members of the clan who said, the Abu Latif are Druze family where loyalty is a keyword, and the second keyword is connections. They have a huge network, ties to the police, to local authorities and other criminals. There are also lawyers, doctors, and financial advisors who work exclusively with Abu Latif and not permitted to work somewhere else. And this gives him a very strong position in the criminal world. Please go to the next one. I have here a table. In 2023, over 80% of the recorded homicides were attributed to Israeli minorities. We do not have specific information about Druze violence in this case, but in this table you can see a sharp increase in incidents in violent killings. And this was also the Druze community was very much affected by it. Please go next one. And this brings me to the next thing which I wanted to stress today, and the fact that most of the victims were killed by gunfire underscores the presence of significant quantity of illegal weapons within the villages in Galilee. And many of my respondents mentioned their fears and sleepless nights and nightmares. Everyone knew to tell about a family member or friend or neighbor who had fallen victim to the ongoing conflict between rival criminal clans. And becoming accustomed to acts of violence and swiftly resuming after each killing signifies a level of acceptance of this unavoidable evil. And these members, when they are killed, usually they are neutralized like it is a professional risk. They knew what they're adding, what they're joining, their own fault. If an intended target goes into hiding, close family members may be selected as substitute. And many of these targets indeed were innocent people, but members of the organization understand that if they are arrested, they must keep silent or their own family will be harmed. When the member of the family is killed, there will be a response and the toll must be paid. Every hit is avenged, even if it takes weeks, months, or even years. This is a kind of vicious circle of violence, and the concept of continuum of violence implies that consistent exposure to violence results in its normalization. Violence as a dimension of living rather than a domain of death. Please go to the next one. Because the logical question, of course, after what I told you, should be, where are the law enforcement? Where is the police? And there is a lot of criticism of the Israeli police forces about the inefficiency, indifference towards this escalating violence within the Druze communities. And on one side, there is a conspiracy theory contending that the surge in violence is orchestrated by the police as a kind of tool or mean to uphold control and authority of Israeli minorities. On the other side, from the subcultural perspective, the Jewish political elite and the police believe that violence is a result of the culture, an instance of blaming the victim. And this is also emphasized by certain Druze representatives who cultivated a kind of self-criticism, attributing the rise of violent crime within their community to their own traditions. And I don't have conclusions. I'm coming to the end, so I don't have conclusions here, and I'm not particularly optimistic about the future in the Galilee. In specific period after 8 October, and this is a terrible war, and especially when Hezbollah joined the conflict, the Galilee came under attack. And for a short time, it looked like criminals have stopped killing each other. There were almost no shootings in the villages. However, it was a very short period, and in winter 2024, the killings resumed. And as attention shifted toward Gaza and the border with Lebanon, criminal organizations used the opportunity to resume their activities, taking advantage of the fact that there was less chance of getting caught. So my only conclusion can be that this war has only created new opportunities for organized crime in the Galilee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Siegel, for your talk. Now we are moving to the second speaker, Professor William Miles from Northeastern University at Boston. Professor Miles is a professor of political science at Northeastern University. Professor Miles was formerly the Stokesy Professor of Jewish Historical and Cultural Studies at Northeastern University, a 5-time Fulbright Award recipient. Professor Miles has published a dozen books and 7 journal articles. Two of his books, Zion and Desert and Jews of Nigeria, were National Jewish Book Award finalists. He has published 4 online articles based on his experience in an Israeli Druze village. I guess it was Horfish. Professor Miles will give a talk under the title Modernization Discourse in the Israeli Druze Context, 1975-2021, from Egon to Abbas and Court. Please, Professor Miles.
Thank you, Yusri. And that's quite all right that you let the cat out of the bag in terms of my site. Yes.
I'm following you.
Let's see. I'm sharing, I think, too much from my screen. Let me stop the share, excuse me, and then just get to my PowerPoint. You're seeing too much? Hello?
Now we have it.
Okay. You have just the PowerPoint?
I think we can deal with that. We can see your PowerPoints.
Yeah, Dr. Miles, we can see your PowerPoint, but if you click on present, we will be able to see it full screen. That would be much more helpful.
And present is where? Oh, I see. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. There. Yoter Tov?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let me repeat my thanks to you, Rami, for convening once again Druze Studies Conference. There is my title. I need not repeat it, and I will just say that I take seriously more than most people and more than I always do the theme of the conference. And the theme being discourses of tradition and modernity, I decided that I was going to use the Druze case to re-explore the literature on modernity, modernization, and postmodernism vis-a-vis tradition and traditionalism, which raises a couple of theoretical general questions. When is the traditional that we're talking about in contrasting traditional and modernity? And where is the modern, particularly when we're talking about the Druze in the Levant in particular? I begin my paper with a Druze quote. I conclude the paper also with a different Druze quote. And this is not to endorse the sentiment, but rather to acknowledge that there is this trend within the culture of believing that nothing comes to us from the West, which delights the heart. So if we're going to contrast, for example, the Druze, and my focus is on the Israeli Druze, once again, when I came across this image, I said this could not actually be a wedding itself. It must be a girl pretending that she's getting married. But I contacted the archival division of the World Zionist Organization, which sent me the reference. It is indeed a wedding. If we contrast traditional weddings in, let's say, the late 19th century, the one on the left being from Lebanon, and the one on the right being a wedding that I was invited to in the Upper Galilee in 2015, the differences are obvious, both on the female side and on the male side. And again, a wedding confirmed to be an Israeli Druze one from the 1950s. And from that same wedding, here is the bridegroom. So just some images from this wedding that I attended, and as a way of mentioning that music in weddings among the Druze in Israel, based on my fieldwork, is very, very controversial. In fact, this wedding could not be celebrated in the village itself because of the edict by the sheikhs that music at weddings is haram. So this Druze wedding is actually taking place elsewhere. There are two other aspects of traditional Druze life as policed by the sheikhs, which I want to mention, both one of them relating to women, one of them relating to Professor Siegel's presentation. Driving by women is also very controversial within the Druze communities. And the Hamula, which is so critical to the presentation by Professor Siegel, there are very positive aspects of clan inclusiveness and closeness, but there is criticism that the expectations of visiting is rather strong, too strong for many of the Druze. So going back to classical theoretical models of modernization, Lerner, McClelland, Inglis, and Smith, and Rostow, looking at psychological, economic, and educational changes in a society. We enter with Ronald Inglehart, the literature on postmodernity, which includes self-expression, atomization beyond individualization, secularization, and a democratic ethos. One could add consumerism and mass popular culture, social media as elements of postmodernity. So let me give you my major findings of Israel, Druze, and the modern tradition binary. That Israeli Druze society has leapfrogged from classical modernization, according to theory, to what is thought of as a postmodern variant. That Druze, since the 1970s in Israel in particular, have overall identified more with the Jewish than with the Arab sectors, and that Druze religious and political leadership, education, schools, the IDF participation, all of these elements have reinforced Druze Israelization. One major caveat, which was mentioned by Dr. Dinsef earlier in the first panel, the effect of the nationality law vis-a-vis the Druze population and their belief that Israelizing and modernizing, which go hand in hand, are both compromised by this new legislation. So, who are the scholars of modernization as applied to the Israeli Druze? Now, the first scholar I'm going to mention, he's not a modernization scholar per se, but Chaim Blanc, who wrote or published one of the first articles regarding the Druze of Israel from the modern versus traditional or old perspective. What he wrote reads so offensively today that I'm not going to put it in my own voice. But it needs to be acknowledged. More importantly, is this article by Egon Kheir, Becoming Modern in Beit al-Shabab. Since Dr. Brake has already identified the village where I did research, I will nevertheless preserve the pseudonymity of Beit al-Shabab in honor of Professor Kheir. I'll just say that it is the immediate neighbor of the village that Dr. Hazran has mentioned. According to Kheir in 1975, the stigma of being backward, of being inferior, is something that would be combated by a identification with the Arab world as opposed to the Israeli world on account of perceived prejudice. Of course, that is not the way that things have emerged. And Professor Egon Kheir's career is very interesting because when he tragically died at the early age of 59, he was most known for being a specialist on American Jewish assimilation. In the course of the research, I actually tracked down and interviewed the widow of Professor Kheir, which gave me some different perspectives as well. But for the purpose of this presentation, let's jump ahead 4 decades to a much more contemporary treatment of modernization vis-a-vis traditionalism in the Druze communities of Israel. And this book was co-authored by a Druze, Israeli Druze, Dr. Randa Abbas, and an Israeli of original Jewish Canadian origin, Dr. Deborah Court. These 2 quotes that I have are the most significant takeaways from the book. That the surrounding culture in traditional society is no longer just the culture that is physically close. And this is very important, the internet culture. The internet culture, which they characterize as insidious, as powerful, and almost as unavoidable. My own research also reveals controversies regarding the use of the smartphone, and in particular, the extent to which Druze parents in Israel will allow their children access to, if not possession of, that Trojan horse, as Court and Abbas put it. In terms of religion and traditionalism, I will read this one quote, that the burning question: in order for the Druze to live in the modern world, religious concessions must be provided. But at what point does this compromise the religion itself? And Druze religion being at the fulcrum of Druze identity. At what point is there no one left except a few sheikhs who know the inner secrets? How many more generations will there be? Earlier, we saw maps of Israel, of the Druze in both Israel and elsewhere in the Levant. And I'll just show you the pinpoint of where my research field site has been. my permission to do work in Israeli Druze schools, primary and secondary. So I'm now going to give you a photographic tour of the village, driving in, and you'll see icons and stores that look familiar to you, a knockoff of Kentucky Fried Chicken, all of which, even in this 100%, well, 99% Druze village, the signs are in Hebrew, a mark of political modernity. An optician's shop, tourism, again, more tourism, and controversially, the shops catering to feminine beauty, which in traditional Druze society is not something that you would celebrate and certainly advertise. Notice that none of these signs are in Arabic. So going back to the wedding in the 1950s and what it looks like today, we can see obvious differences in the way in which that tradition is celebrated. Consumerism, pictures, again, consumerism as part of, as a hallmark of modernity. Pictures taken from my original host's home before I got my own pad in the village, the bank, and Markaz. Here's the Druze instructor for martial arts. Notice his left arm, his tattoos, which I think when you add the yin and yang to the symbols of Israel, the Magen David, and the Druze five-colored triangle, or pentagon, I should say, and you've got the yin and the yang, then you see the postmodern slant. Show you a few pictures of the people I call Druze geeks. An orthodox, religiously orthodox Druze, a man who owns a computer shop. The Druze webmaster for the entire village, who also produces the television program, the closed circuit one, very religiously clad Druze woman, so religiously clad that the children at the school would call her the ninja. So as I get towards the end of my pictorial village presentation, contrasting Druze youth of then and today, that of the girls in particular. My research privileged me into spending lots of quality time in the schools, the primary schools. The haircuts are modern Israeli football or soccer among the young boys as they emulate their favorite players. And the very first day of school for Kita Aleph, for first graders, all the hallmarks of youth modernity that you would like or expect, including the haircuts. And I cannot help but show you the twins who captured my camera. I've already presented my major findings at the beginning of my presentation. I need not repeat them. I'll just conclude with the proverb that ends my paper. Again, not to endorse, but to acknowledge, stick to the old, the new may not last. And having shared with you my takeaways of what the transition from tradition to modernity has meant in this one Israeli Druze village, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Maz, for your lecture. Now we are moving to the third speaker. The speaker will be Dr. Afifa Kheir from the University of Adelaide. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Adelaide, new Druze recruits in the Golan Heights, shifting identities and military integration. Dr. Afifa Kheir is a Druze social science, linguistic radio host, university lecturer, and international expert in Druze linguistics. As a researcher and author, her work spans social science, minority studies, global affairs, mental health, and linguistic research, both contributing to academic and public discourse. Please, Dr. Afifa Kheir, or Eva Afifa Kheir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hazran, and thank you, Professor Zidan, for the invitation. I'll quickly share my PowerPoint. All right, so let's do this. Great stuff. So hello, everyone. Today, I'll be talking about the new phenomena of the enlistment of Golan Druze into the Israeli Defense Forces, aka the IDF. This shift would have seemed unimaginable even less than a decade ago, as historically speaking, the Golan Druze have been known for their symbolic resistance of the Israeli integration and avoidance of military service. However, over the past few years, we're witnessing a drastic change. So we'll look at the social political forces that are driving this transformation and what it reveals about evolving identity and state-minority relations in Israel. So what is driving this transformation? To investigate this, I conducted interviews with recruits and military officials, and I complemented these with analysis of government reports and media coverage and historical records. I also compared the emerging patterns with long-established military service among the Israeli Druze from the Galilee and Carmel regions. And the findings point to several key factors. And the images that you're going to be seeing are all images of Golan Druze military training in the Golan Heights. Some of them are from the IDF spokesperson that were published in media articles, and some of them are mine. So the first, we have the first finding that the several key factor was the growing visibility of successful Druze military leaders and public figures. Many participants in the study have highlighted the importance of having trainers and commanders from the Galilee and Carmel, who obviously are Druze and share similar religious and linguistic and cultural background. This inspired both motivation and confidence among those recruits. Also, the national acknowledgement of the contributions of prominent Druze officers from the Galilee and the Carmel, who have risen to senior ranks such as generals and battalion commanders. And their achievements, they all have inspired admiration across the Golan. At the same time, local public figures such as the Majd al-Shams Mayor Golan Abu Saleh, who publicly identified himself as a proud Israeli Druze. He motivates young Golan Druze individuals to assume their rights and obligations to the state of Israel, whether it's through military service or national civilian service. Golan Abu Saleh acts as a local advocate for volunteering in the IDF, and he holds significant influence on the Golan youth, which of course drives their motivation to enlist in the Israeli army. Now, one of the most crucial factors that are driving this change and transformation is the dramatic regional events over the past decade. First, we had the Syrian civil war, which disrupted practical connections that the Golan Druze had with Syria, and it provoked a lot of violence and atrocities against the Druze in Syria. And this in turn caused the Golan Druze to realize that their safety and security cannot be taken for granted, and that Israel is a robust state that's capable of protecting the Druze from such threats. And then, of course, there was the October 7th terrorist attack by Hamas and the Gazans, which caused the Golan Druze to be alert to the possibility of being targeted. This unfortunately has happened when Hezbollah rocket struck a soccer field in Majd al-Shams, which resulted in the deaths of 12 innocent Golan Druze children. And this tragedy reinforced Druze identification with Israel, as we have seen Israeli officials, including the Prime Minister, hurried to the site, and they condemned the massacre, and they extended their support to the families and to the towns and to the entire community. And then, sadly, there was the most horrific massacre of Druze in contemporary times, which occurred in Suwaida in Syria in July this year. The Golan Druze closely monitored how Israel initiated strikes on key regime targets in Damascus in order to protect the Syrian Druze and to halt their persecution. And this act not only fostered loyalty among the Golan Druze, but also prompted the Syrian Druze themselves to request Israeli sovereignty and wave Israeli flags inside of Syria. And they even said that they're prepared to serve in the IDF as well. And this increased the perception among the Golan Druze that their security and safety and survival even are by far dependent on Israel. Another contributing factor is the decline of internal communal resistance to enlistment. The community's opposition towards Israeli citizenship and military service has diminished, and social sanctions that have been acted in the past have completely disappeared. And in fact, following October 7th atrocities, Golan local councils actively requested to collaborate with the IDF to establish rapid response teams, armed rapid response teams within their communities. And this, of course, highlights a growing acceptance of cooperation with security forces, which facilitates individual enlistment as well. Generational change is another contributing factor. The new generation who've been raised completely under Israeli governance, they are largely detached from the whole Syrian theme, and they are all about full integration into the Israeli society. And we have heard and seen government reports that by the first half of 2025, applications for Israeli citizenship increased twofold compared to the entirety of 2024, making over 20% of the community Israeli citizens. And these numbers are expected to increase rapidly as well, or keep on increasing rapidly. For the new generation, volunteering in the IDF is perceived as a means of protecting their own community and enhancing their own personal opportunities. So how is this trend of enlistment transforming the Golan Druze in relation to the Israeli state and society? For the Golan Druze, joining the IDF will connect them deeper to Israeli life and facilitate deeper integration, just like it was the case with the Israeli Druze soldiers. Their political views and affiliations are beginning to reflect those of the Israeli Druze, and they're more and more openly backing Israeli leadership, including the Prime Minister Netanyahu, whom they see as acting in the interests of the Druze community, both in Israel and in Syria. This, of course, marks a significant integration of perspective, as they're beginning to be considered as participants or insiders in Israel's political landscape, rather than as outsiders. Golan Druze are also becoming increasingly proficient in Hebrew, and they are very comfortable using it. And just like the Israeli Druze, who frequently mix Arabic and Hebrew to the point that they created a mixed language, the Golan Druze are adopting similar behaviors as their exposure to Israeli society is rapidly increasing. Golan Druze are also witnessing the considerable respect and admiration of the Israeli Druze community by Jewish Israelis, who are increasingly referring to them as our brethren. This may cause the Golan Druze to experience a transformation in their identity from being outsiders to insiders. And for instance, the Israeli media regarded the victims of Majd al-Shams Hezbollah rocket attack as a vital part of the national tragedy. And for them, this acknowledgement made them feel Israelis like everyone else, something that they haven't felt in the past. And this can strengthen a sense of patriotism among the Golan Druze. Now, in terms of identity, the Golan Druze are gradually adapting to new realities. Historically, they define themselves as Arab by culture and Syrian by nationality. But over the past decade, this started shifting. They started adopting a more neutralized, undefined identity that was gradually transforming into a Hadbawi or Julani identity, meaning simply from the Golan. The interviews, however, revealed that there's a developing identity that may be referred to as Israeli Golan Druze, with the Israeli identity component getting traction, something which was very out of character for the Golan Druze until the recent chain of events. It is highly likely that more and more Golan Druze will begin to identify more closely with their counterparts in the Carmel and the Galilee, who proudly identify as Israeli Druze and have been defining themselves as Israeli Druze since they started serving in the army. So just as it has been the case with the Israeli Druze, it is expected that military service will serve as a catalyst in this transformation, since it instills values of belonging, duty, and a shared purpose with the state. In conclusion, this study examined the emerging phenomena of voluntary enlistment among the Golan Druze in the Israeli Defense Forces. And this trend tells a fascinating story of shifting loyalties, evolving identities, and adaptation in a complex geopolitical context. Key findings indicate that motivations for enlistment are multifaceted. Druze military leaders, as I've mentioned, from the Galilee and Carmel, served as important facilitators and role models. At the same time, participants emphasized security concerns that are arising from events such as the Syrian civil war, the October 7th atrocities, the Hezbollah rocket attack in Majd al-Shams, and the most recent attempted genocide of the entire Druze community in Suwaida. And this also alongside Israel's continuous support and protection of the Druze communities in Israel and in Syria. And of course, also the erosion of community resistance and generational shift in perspective. And their shift is manifested from perceiving serving in the army in the past as an act of betrayal to perceiving it in modern times as an honor and a privilege. This shift in perspective has also played a key role in this transformation. And in terms of identity, the community is experiencing a transformation. The rapidly increasing acceptance of Israeli citizenship and military service, alongside pride in Druze heritage rather than Syrian, it's all given rise to a developing identity repertoire that includes Israeli, Golani, and Druze components, all of which were completely non-existent when the Golan was under Syrian control. Because when they were under Syrian control, they were forced to identify as Syrian Arabs only. This, of course, reflects how new loyalties and the sense of belonging are manifesting within the Golan Druze, as the Golan Druze are rewriting their relationship with the state of Israel. And in doing so, they challenge us to rethink what integration, belonging, and loyalty mean in a divided region. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eva Afifa Kheir. Now we are moving to the last speaker of this session will be our friend, Dr. Salim Brake from the Open University of Israel. Dr. Salim Brake has a PhD in political science with a thesis on parliamentarism, and his research focuses on the Israeli Knesset. His area of study includes Arab political participation in Israel, mixed cities in Israel, and the Druze minority across the Middle East. Currently, he is working on a book about the Druze community in Israel and its presence in the Middle East. Dr. Brake will present his paper on the election among the Druze for the 2025 Knesset in Israel. The presentation will be delivered in Arabic under the title الانتخابات للدروز الكنيست العشرين وحتى الخامسة والعشرين في إسرائيل. Please, Dr. Brake.
Thank you, my dear friend Yusri, and thanks for Rami and everybody. I'm going to make you boring now twice. Once that I'm the last one who's speaking, and the second that I will do it in Arabic. Unfortunately, I thought that more people will introduce in Arabic. So anyway, just a moment, I try to share my paper. I don't know if just a moment, it's a little bit complicated for me, but okay. I hope that you see it. Actually, I'm going to deal with the Druze political participation and in the Israeli politics, but of course I will take the last 5 elections in Israel since the 20th until the 25th Knesset as an indicator for the Druze political participation and its unique parameters. So let's start. I will make it a little bit more short. The theory is that the Druze are border minorities in Israel, Syria, and Jordan. And there are some special treatment for border minorities, like suspicious, instrumental use, and extra. And nowadays, we are witness for such use and the treatment for minorities, as we see in Syria, the massacres against the Druze in Sweden, and we didn't finish with this tragedy till now. We have still have more than 80 hostages, and more than 100,000 even Druze are now out of their houses. They have no houses. Okay, I turn into Arabic as عمليا هنتحدث عن 3 مميزات أو 4 مميزات للنظرية التي أطرحها. أولا حكيت عن نظرية الحدود border minorities وما تأثير معاملة أقليات على هذا الأساس. الأمر الثاني أن الدروز في سوريا أقلية دينية طبعا يعدوا كافرين حسب الإسلام السني، وفي الأردن مثلا طمست الهوية الدرزية ويتحدثون وكأنهم إسلام بكل مفهوم الكلمة، وبينما في إسرائيل الدروز هم أقلية لغوية ودينية، وهذا نراه في مميزات العمل السياسي الدرزي في إسرائيل. طبعا نقطة إضافية هي وجود أيديولوجية مهيمنة صهيونية في إسرائيل التي تتناقض عمليا مع مصالح أساسية للطائفة الدرزية في إسرائيل. والقضية الإضافية هي عمليا التعامل مع الدروز ليس كمواطنين متساويين منذ إقامة الدولة، وإنما كأقلية مفضلة على باقي الأقليات الأخرى. تقرر في سنة 1951 أن الدروز هم أقلية أفضل من باقي الأقليات، ولكن لم يقرر في أي مكان بأنهم أقلية متساوية ومواطنين متساويين. النظرية التي ممكن وصفها للتعامل مع الأقلية الدرزية من الناحية السياسية هي نظرية السيطرة على النخب والأقليات والقيادات co-optation، وهذه النظرية عمليا وضعت من قبل الأجهزة الأمنية الاستخبارات، وأصبحت السياسة المنتهجة منذ قيام الدولة حتى اليوم تجاه الطائفة الدرزية. عمليا كانت البداية مع بعض القادات أو العائلات التقليدية. في الماضي تحدثت الأجهزة الإسرائيلية عن 3 عائلات، عائلة خير وعائلة معدي وعائلة طريف. اليوم توجد عائلة واحدة فقط لها تأثير سياسي حقيقي بشكل أو بآخر، هي عائلة طريف. طبعا لما نتحدث عن عائلات نحن نتحدث أيضا عن عائلات تابعة لهذه العائلات المركزية، نحن نرى هذا في كل القرى وفي كل الأماكن. عمليا أنا لا أستطيع أن أدخل هنا لمناقشة قضية نظرية الكوبتيشن، هي معقدة جدا ومركبة جدا، ولكن من المهم أن نفهم أنها نظرية من خلالها تتم السيطرة على القيادات السياسية الدينية، القيادات بالسلطات المحلية، وأيضا القيادات في المجتمع المدني مثل قيادات المثقفين وأصحاب المهن وإلى آخره. طبعا كل مجموعة أو كل نخبة معينة لها أسلوب معين للتعامل معها توضع بواسطة أجهزة الدولة المختلفة. من الناحية السياسية والتمثيل البرلماني نحن نتحدث عمليا عن عملية التمثيل البرلماني الخاضع لباترون كلينت، النظرية السيد والعميل، أي أنه بشكل عام في الحزب يكون هناك قائد معين هو الذي يضع تحت كنفه شخص معين يدخله إلى العمل البرلماني مثلا، أو يعينه مستشار وزير أو مساعد وزير. هذه الوظائف التي هي عمليا تكون أكثر وظائف شكلية وغير مؤثرة في الحقيقة، ولكنها هي طريقة أيضا للسيطرة على المناخ السياسي. وبهذه الطريقة طبعا تحصل الدولة على أمرين: الأمر الأول هو الشرعية الديمقراطية لأنها تمثل الأقليات، ومن الناحية الثانية هي عملية تسيطر على القوة السياسية للأقليات. هذا النمط التمثيل المحدود أو التمثيل الشكلي عمليا تحدث عنه باحثين من سنوات طويلة جدا مثل بيتكين، بيرخ، ريودن وآخرين الذين بحثوا أنماط التمثيل البرلماني. أنا أتحدث هنا فقط عن التمثيل البرلماني. فالتمثيل البرلماني الوحيد الذي هو تمثيل برلماني ديمقراطي هو عمليا تمثيل برلماني حقيقي، active representation، والذي عمليا عضو البرلمان يتعلق بالمواطنين وبإرادة ورغبة المواطنين، وليس بالسيد الذي أو بالحزب الذي يعينه. ولذلك نحن نرى هذا الضعف في العمل البرلماني لأعضاء الكنيست. طبعا في هذه الحالة أعضاء الكنيست يجب أن يعملوا بطريقة ترضي الحزب، ترضي أسياد الحزب الذين عمليا بواسطتهم وصلوا إلى البرلمان، وكل الكارير أو كل الحياة المستقبلية لهم متعلقة بهذه القيادات البرلمانية. ولذلك نحن نراهم يقومون بأعمال شكلية أو أعمال رمزية من أجل مواطنيهم فقط للحفاظ على المصالح الخاصة. أنا لا أريد الدخول في الأسامي، ولكن يعني تحدثتم في الماضي عن أو قبلي عن قانون القومية العنصري. هذا القانون اقترحه أيضا ووقع عليه كمقترح عضوين كنيسة دروز. فيما بعد صوت إلى صالح هذا القانون العنصري وزير درزي، وعضو كنيسة آخر طلب منه من الحزب أن لا يصوت لكي يحافظ على الإلكتورات أو المصوتين في الطائفة الدرزية، لأنه وجدوا أن هناك 62 عضو كنيسة مؤيدين وليسوا بحاجة إليه، ولذلك سمح له أن يصوت ضد القانون. المفارقة أن أحد أعضاء الكنيست توجه إلى المحكمة العليا بواسطة محامين أكثر من مرة ضد هذا القانون، ولكنه يؤيد حزب الذي كان من المتشددين لتقديم هذا القانون ولدعمه. هذا يدل فقط على بسيخوزة معينة في العمل السياسي البرلماني. أنت من ناحية ضد شيء معين، ومن ناحية ثانية تخدم هذا الشيء لأن مصلحتك والكارير يفرض عليك هذا القبول. كيف يتم التمثيل في الكنيست وما هو التأثير الحقيقي إذا أردنا أن نفحص الإداء البرلماني؟ أولا نحن نرى أن في غالب الأحيان عضو الكنيست لا توجد له حرية خاصة لاتخاذ القرارات أو التصويت. يعني أنا أذكر من عملي في الكنيست قبل سنين طويلة جدا أن عضو كنيست معين امتنع في التصويت على اتفاقيات أوسلو، وقال له في الحزب أنت مطرود من الحزب نهائيا، أي أنه لا توجد لك إمكانية أن تصوت ضميريا أو حسب ما يريد مجتمعك. ونحن نتحدث عن اتفاقيات التي حصلت على تقريبا 70% دعم في قلب المجتمع الذي يأتي منه هذا العضو الكنيست. أمثلة بسيطة، حاليا حدثنا عن القانون القومي، ولكن مثلا تعديل كيمينيتس، هنا نحن نرى مثلا أن في هذا التعديل لم يكن أي تأثير لأعضاء الكنيست الدروز، وليس فقط في الكنيست وإنما حتى في أحزابهم. يعني نحن نتحدث عن عضو كنيست معين كل حزبه كان مؤيد وداعم بشكل قوي لتعديل كيمينيتس، هذا التعديل الذي يؤثر بشكل سلبي يومي على الشباب في الطائفة الدرزية. يعني على سبيل المثال نفهم هذا الموضوع. هناك من يطلب منهم دفع غرامات حوالي $90,000 على بناء بيت على أراضيهم الخاصة من أبناء الطائفة الدرزية. هذا له علاقة بتطور هذه الطائفة. بالمناسبة الطائفة الوحيدة التي تتناقص عدديا في إسرائيل هي الطائفة الدرزية، يعني نيجاتيف جروث، وهذا يدل أيضا على الضائقة الحقيقية التي موجودين فيها الطائفة الدرزية. فبشكل عام إذا أردت أن نلخص كل ما أقول، فنحن نتحدث عن سلوك سياسي لا يتفق مع أي نظرية للمشاركة السياسية الديمقراطية، لأن المشاركة السياسية الديمقراطية تقول هناك inputs وهناك outputs، ويجب أن يكون تناسق بين ما أنا أوظفه في الحلبة السياسية وما النتيجة التي أحصل عليها. هنا نحن نرى تناقض شبه تام بين هذه الأمور. المؤسسة طبعا لم تكتسي بالسيطرة على القيادات والنخب بهذه الأساليب، بل حصلت أيضا على طرق معقدة أكثر للسيطرة على ما يسمى الانفراستراكشر السياسي، في مثلا السيطرة على الشباب، السيطرة على المثقفين، السيطرة على كل هذه بعدة أساليب مختلفة لا نستطيع الدخول إليها هنا. مثلا ومؤسسات مثلا التي وظيفتها الغربلة والسيطرة على التوجهات السياسية أو التوجهات الحزبية إلى آخره. المشكلة هنا أن غالبية أبناء الطائفة الدرزية يدركون هذه الأمور التي أنا أتحدث عنها، يدركون الفرق الكبير بين مكانتهم السياسية الحقيقية لبين مكانتهم السياسية الشكلية. يعني جيب مثال، التقيت بمناسبة قبل كم يوم مع ضابط متقاعد كبير في الجيش، والذي كان له وظيفة مهمة جدا أيضا في مؤسسة أمنية بعد الخدمة العسكرية. ولأول مرة أنا أعرف هذا الضابط سنين طويلة جدا، ولأول مرة أنا أشعر بأنه فجأة انقلب وأصبح يعني كريتيكال أو يعني ناقد جدا للسياسة الإسرائيلية تجاه الطائفة الدرزية. وسألته ماذا حدث؟ يعني نحن نعرف كانت لنا نقاشات حادة وأنت كنت من أكثر المؤيدين للسياسة الإسرائيلية. فاكتشفت بأن ابنه حصل على غرامة حوالي 300,000 شيكل، ما يقارب 90,000 دولار، على بيت الذي بناه على أرضه. فإذا يعني الأمور تنكشف مع الوقت، وهناك نقاط معينة أو حالات معينة يضطر الإنسان فيها أن يواجه الحقيقة وأن يخرج من مما سماه كارل ماركس فيك ريكوجنيشن. يعني أحيانا يجب أن نصل إلى الاستنتاج بأن هناك فرق كبير بين المكانة السياسية الشكلية وبين المكانة السياسية الحقيقية. هناك أيضا أهمية كبيرة لأن نفهم الفرق الكبير بين القدرة السياسية الشكلية وبين القدرة السياسية الحقيقية لممثلين الدروز في الكنيست. فمثلا نحن نرى انعدام التأثير تقريبا في كل المجالات، في المجال الاقتصادي، في مجال البناء والمسكن. تحدثت بروفيسور قبلي عن الإجرام في الطائفة الدرزية. نحن نتحدث في السنوات الأخيرة عن 59 شاب وشابة دروز قتلوا بواسطة منظمات الإجرام، والشرطة تقريبا لا تقوم بأي شيء في هذا الموضوع. طبعا هذا لا يختلف عن معاملة الشرطة للمواطنين العرب الآخرين، وهذا يدل بأن أبناء الطائفة الدرزية لا يختلفوا من وجهة النظر المؤسسية عن الآخر. من ناحية نظرية هناك 3 مستويات أساسية للمشاركة السياسية. أولا يعني لنشرح لماذا المشاركة السياسية مهمة. أولا لأنها تغذي السياسة الفعلية. يعني أهمية المشاركة السياسية هي أولا لكي تحرك المنظومة السياسية البرلمانية كباحث برلماني. لا حياة للبرلمان من غير مشاركة سياسية حقيقية. الثانية، الهدف الثاني هو عمليا تنمية ما يسمى أو بناء ما يسمى المواطن الملتزم أو the good citizen، المواطن الذي يهتم بمصالح الدولة ويرى في الدولة الحاضن له ولمصالحه. والأمر الثالث الذي نتحدث عنه هو الشروط المطلوبة للمشاركة السياسية. يعني بأحد أبحاثي مثلا وجدت بأن قسم كبير من مصوتي بعض الأحزاب لا يعرفون أي شيء نهائيا عن الحزب الذي صوتوا له. بينما المشاركة السياسية الحقيقية يجب أن تكون عن وعي وعن فهم ما مفهوم المشاركة السياسية، لماذا أنا أشارك ولماذا أنا أدعم هذا الحزب وليس ذلك الحزب.
أخي سليم،
نحن
إذا
نتحدث
ممكن
عن 3
نتقدم
مستويات من
للتلخيص.
المشاركة السياسية. نعم.
إذا ممكن نتقدم للتلخيص عشان نظل في مجال للأسئلة.
كيف؟ نحن نتحدث عن 3 مستويات من المشاركة السياسية. نتحدث عن مشاركة على مستوى عالي مثل تقلد وظائف أو تقديم طلب لوظيفة أو تبرعات وكل هذه الأمور. نحن نرى مثلا هناك بعض أنواع العمليات المشاركة السياسية في هذا الاتجاه. المستوى الثاني هو المشاركة في فعاليات سياسية مثلا أو التبرع في أموال، وهذه الأمور تقريبا لا نصل إليها ولا نراها. وهناك المستويات المنخفضة أكثر مثلا إلصاق ستيكرز أو محاولة إقناع آخرين أو على الأقل التصويت، وهنا نرى المشاركة غير متجانسة وهي تعلو وتنخفض. أحاول في باختصار شديد. أولا نحن ماذا يحدث مع التصويت؟ نحن نرى أن هناك انخفاض خصوصا في السنوات الأخيرة، كنيست 23 كنيست 24 كنيست 25 التي وصلت حتى أقل من 50% من نسبة التصويت. هذا يدل على عدم ثقة في المنظومة السياسية والمنظومة البرلمانية. الأمر الثاني، نحن نرى حقيقة مشاركة على أساس أيديولوجي إلا في حوالي 7 لحد 10% في أحسن الأحوال. والأمر الثاني هو مشاركة على أساس شخصي حمائلي أو على أساس ابن البلد. مثلا رأينا هذا في شفاعمر، رأينا هذا في يركا، رأينا هذا في عدة أماكن في بيت جان إلى آخره. ثلاثة، مشاركة على أساس علاقات سابقة مثلا مع الجيش. نسأل شخص معين لماذا تصوت لهذا الحزب ويقول هناك ضابط كان الضابط المسؤول عني في الجيش ولذلك أنا أصوت. 4، تصويت لمصلحة شخصية أو لقريب، مثلا يعدون قريب بوظيفة معينة فهو يريد أن يصوت لهذا الحزب من أجل أن يساعد هذا القريب أو ابن العائلة للتصويت. إذا نظرنا إلى التصويت للكنيست سنرى أن هناك تباين كبير جدا في نسبة التصويت مثلا لأحزاب المركز أو نسبة التصويت لأحزاب اليمين. ونحن نلاحظ مثلا في الكنيسة 24 نسبة التصويت لليمين اجتازت 60%، بالرغم أنه اليمين هو الذي مرر قانون كيمينيتس وقانون القومية. هناك أمور غريبة مثلا في المشاركة السياسية، مثلا تصويت لأحزاب لا علاقة لها بالدروز. يعني أول بحث أنا عملته كان لما كان 25% من الدروز في إحدى القرى صوتوا للمفدال، حزب صهيوني ديني الذي حصل في تلك الفترة فقط على 8% فقط في المجتمع اليهودي. أو التصويت مثلا لأحزاب حريديت مثل يهودة التراث وإلى آخره. أنواع التصويت تختلف جدا من بلد لبلد بالرغم من القرب الجغرافي بين هذه البلاد. لا يوجد تفسير حقيقي لماذا التصويت هنا مختلف جدا عن التصويت في البلد الآخر. تقلب في التصويت، يعني حزب بلد معينة يكون فيها الحزب الأقوى شاس ثم ينقلب ويأتي بدله إسرائيل بيتينو العلماني وثم يأتي بدله القائمة العربية المشتركة. لا تفسير منطقي لهذه التوزعات. هذه مثلا صورة معينة للتصويت في بلدان معينة مثل دائرة الكرمل أو بيت جان أو شفاعمر. فنحن نرى التغير الكبير والارتفاع والانخفاض في أنماط التصويت لأحزاب معينة. أحيانا التصويت ينقلب من كنيست إلى كنيست، فنحن نرى على سبيل المثال هنا أحزاب المركز تقريبا تكاد تكون غير موجودة أو هنا غير موجودة، ولكن هنا تكون من أقوى الأحزاب. هذه الأمور تدل على نوعية المشاركة البرلمانية أو السياسية الغير فعالة. التلخيص، أولا الدروز يحظون بتمثيل شكلي وغير مؤثر، هذا رأيناه تقريبا منذ قيام الدولة حتى الآن. الأمر الثاني، الدروز يحصلون على تمثيل كمي أكبر بكثير من نسبتهم في المجتمع الإسرائيلي. الدروز 1.3% أو 1.1 من الإلكتورات. عمليا لا توجد استراتيجية لتبلور تصرف ومشاركة سياسية مجدية. لا يوجد حديث عن ما جدوى المشاركة السياسية في هذه الطريقة. وانتهازية من بعض السياسيين الذين على سبيل المثال واحد من أولئك السياسيين انقلب خلال 20 عام، تحول بين 7 أحزاب مختلفة. لا يوجد تفسير منطقي لمثل هذا التصرف. أرجو أن لا أكون طولت عليكم. شكرا جزيلا على الإصغاء وأعطيكم.
شكرا جزيلا للدكتور سليم بريك على هذه المداخلة. Now we will open the panel for question. I have a question from John Marshall. directed to Professor Siegel about the crime. The question is, how is the crime family perceived within the Druze community and the Druze religious leaders? Are there any punishment boycotts towards the family from the religious leaders? How are they being treated within the community?
Okay, thank you for the question. Very relevant question. Of course, the main victims of this crime are the Druze themselves. And I'm not talking about the people who also live in the villages, including Muslims or Christians or Jews, but we can see definitely that such a clan as Abu Latif, he makes innocent victims in his own villages. So the Druzes are very much opposing and very much trying to influence the law enforcement to take steps in order to arrest him or to take some measures. As I said, unfortunately, law enforcement is not so active or proactive as the whole community will be. Another problem is that because of the fear, because of the whole feeling of being trapped, on the one hand, you not allow your children to go outside to play in the streets. On the other hand, you want to feel free and to visit your family and so on. This kind of controversial feelings, you're still thinking about how to get on terms with even with these criminals in order not to be hurt. But in general, I had a feeling that it was a lot of opposition. There were demonstrations. I also have some pictures in my book. Very active demonstration. We cannot talk about the civil society like in other countries, but it was a very active manifestation against this organized crime. It's not a part of the community. It cannot be a part of the Druze ideology from religious perspective, of course. So I did not have an opportunity to go into details about the how religious leaders are responding to it, but from my fieldwork in the Druze villages there, I have seen a lot of negative attitude toward this phenomenon.
Okay, there's another comment, probably will be relevant for you from the John Marshall, saying that there is, trying to find it. Yeah, it's about Druze lexicon and social discourse. There is no term, there is no concept known as hamula.
Hamula, yeah, absolutely. There is a term.
I don't agree with that. We have hamula, but
of course, but
the argument is there is no concept known as hamula. If you would like to refer to this,
yes, and there are a lot of terms. You can also say bite, and this is another term which probably is more suitable to this. Unfortunately, as I said, I wanted to use Emic language, and all my interviews were in Hebrew, and probably this term hamula is also a part of mainstream media presentation. It's all around Israel, not only in Druze communities. I've been also in Bedouin communities, also Jewish families are called hamula. So they were adapting this kind of terminology also for Druze community. But I also disagree with this claim that there is no hamula. Hamula is mainly an extended family. An extended family, and as I explained, it includes, of course, criminals, and then we are talking about the parts of the hamula who are involved in organized crime, and also include innocent people absolutely not connected to criminal activities.
Yeah, there's another question sent from Professor Zidane. It wrote that it's a question from the audience. My question is more directed toward how the criminology discipline applies to the Druze community. On page 106 in your paper, you state that in the 80s, there were signals that Israeli Arabs were closely cooperating with Jewish criminal groups in Israel and abroad. What did these signals look like? Additionally, are those signals still applicable to the spot today, whether that would be in Druze communities or in other communities? If you would like to refer to this.
I can talk about it hours, but
no, we don't have hours.
No, what I'm trying to say, and I tried to show it also in my presentation, that many Druze criminal groups, gangs, or hamulas, let's use this term still, they are cooperating with Jewish and sometimes with Bedouin criminal gangs, because for organized crime, and this is the most interesting phenomenon in criminology, they don't care with whom they are making money. As long as there are profits, criminal or not criminal, these are the most important aims of criminals. And we see how I gave this example of Abu Latif, who is cooperating with even two rival organizations, with Shmulik Harush and with Michael Moore, who are two infamous criminal leaders in Israel. And they actually don't care with whom to cooperate as long as there will be profits to promote their interests.
Thank you very much. There is a long question for Dr. Eve Afifa Kheir. I will make it short. It's about the engagement of Druze and Golan Druze with the IDF seems to be associated with nationalism and October 7 and the following escalation. The question
Dr.
is,
Hazran, if I may, before Dr. Kheir answers the question, we do have two more questions from the people in the room. So let us allow them to ask the questions.
Okay.
And then, with your permission, they will go around and answer. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, for sure. I was reading the question.
Okay, thank you so much, Awad, if you'd like. And Dr. Abdessalam, if you want to join us, please, here as well.
عبد الصمد جزاك عبد الصمد نعم نعم شكرا للساده المحاضرين والمحاضرات.
It's Dr. Abdessamad, you need to do it from here. إذا ممكن تتفضلي نعم عوض تفضل.
Hi everyone. My question is dedicated to Dr. Afifa. Dr. Afifa, as an Israeli Arab who lives in Israel, I know the Druze in Israel are divided. There are two groups, like the ones who define themselves as Druze, Israeli Druze, and the one who define themselves as Arab Druze, Israeli Arab Druze. You didn't mention anything about that in your presentation, the other part, and basically my question is, in Lebanon and Syria, the Druze consider themselves as Arab Syrians or Arab Lebanese, and Druze only in terms of religion. Meanwhile, the Druze in Israel are divided regarding their Arab identity, to the point that their nationality in the ID card is written as Druze instead of Arabic. I'm not sure about this. Dr. Rami he confirmed in the ID they write Druze, not Arab. The government ID, I mean. Why does this division exist in Israel, especially regarding whether they are Arabs or not? How do the Druze communities in the diaspora view this division, and who is the main beneficiary of it? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We have one more question from our guest, Dr. Najat Abdel-Samad, please.
تحياتي شكرا للسادة المحاضرين والمحاضرات. عندي سؤالين، الأول لدكتورة عفيفة خير ودكتور سليم براقي، سؤال نفسه لكليكما. ما الهدف من إظهار هذا الواقع أو واقع المجتمع الدرزي سواء في الجولان أو في الداخل الفلسطيني، وما يعني موقف الحكومة الإسرائيلية أو حقيقة هذا الوضع؟ هل الهدف هو فقط إظهار مظلومية أم إحداث تغيير في هذا المجتمع، في هذين المجتمعين كل على انفراد، أم الهدف مثلا تشكيل كيان ما خارج الحكومة الإسرائيلية؟ هذا السؤال الأول. الثاني لدكتورة عفيفة خير، هل صحيح أنه بعد مجازر قوات الأمن السورية بحق الدروز في تموز 2025 تم تقديم طلب 3000 لنيل 3000 هوية إسرائيلية بين دروز الجولان؟ شكرا.
Okay, should I start or someone else?
Yeah, please.
All right, no worries at all.
Actually, there's another question related to what asked about the motivation to enlist tied to social economic situation of the Druze, the Golan Druze community. So you can make the connection between the questions.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, as I spoken about the motivations in my presentation and in my talk, and I said that some of them were the fact that they had Druze military leaders as trainers who they actually trained the Golan Druze, and of course because they come from the same cultural and linguistic background and religious background, so it gave them confidence and motivation to be trained by their own counterparts. And of course, the geopolitical situation and all the events that I have mentioned, these acted as crucial factors in motivating that. Because of course, it's not just the security threats that were imposed on Israel itself. They could foretell that the Hamas attack on October 7th could literally cause other terrorists such as Hezbollah and others to target the Syrian, to target the Golan Druze from Syria and other places. And we've seen that with the Hezbollah rocket attack on Majd al-Shams. So they already have foreseen the threats that are coming their way, and they realized that Israel is the robust country that will be able to protect them, not Syria, not Lebanon, not any other country. The fact is, the reality is that they are in Israel and they perceive Israel as a robust country that has their interest and is there to protect them, and therefore they want to collaborate with the IDF in order to make it happen and help protect their own communities. So that was one of the main crucial factors. And of course, the massacre in Suwaida, the Druze massacre in Suwaida, they, of course, this hit them the most because it's their relatives, it's the people that they grew up with. And for them, seeing how the international community have completely disregarded whatever is going on there, and they didn't do anything. And the only country that actually took action was Israel, and they did all the strikes on the regime targets in Damascus in order to deter them and to protect the Druze from those attacks and atrocities and to halt their persecution. So if it weren't for the Israeli intervention, the attempted genocide would have probably reached completion. Yeah, and there wouldn't be any more Druze over there. So of course, the Golan Druze have monitored how Israel has done that and how they protected their brethren in Syria. And they realized that their own survival is actually dependent on Israel and not any other country. So they have to take responsibility for that. That's the part that has to do with.
If you can make it shortly, because we are.
Yeah, and in terms of the question that had to do with Israeli Druze identifying as half and half, it's not exactly half and half, because I myself have conducted the research among the Israeli Druze in terms of identity and linguistic practices, and I've published a lot of books and articles about that. the majority of the Israeli Druze do identify themselves as Israeli Druze, and they have a lot of reverence for the Israeli identity component. Yes, there are few who do identify themselves as Arabs, but they are marginal, and they are actually a minority, not a majority. And I can't remember what was the rest of his question.
About the motivation?
Yeah, motivation, we already addressed that.
It was a question by Dr. Najat Abdel Samad.
About the social political, yeah. So she asked, why are we presenting this? So of course we are presenting this because this is a fascinating story of a community that used to be under dictatorship, under Syrian control, who moved into Israeli control, into democracy, and how they had to manage all the fears of the past that continued haunting them, of what if we return to Syria one day. And at first they refused to identify with Israel, and they refused to seek integration within Israel. And it was mainly because of the fear that they might move back to Syria one day. And it's not just because of having loyalty issues. And now when they realized that their survival is dependent on Israel, they have shifted completely in terms of their loyalties, in terms of their identity, in terms of also assuming their rights and obligations to the state of Israel. And yes, in terms of the applications for Israeli citizenship, it increased twofold from only the first half of 2025 in comparison to the entirety of 2024, and these numbers are rapidly increasing. So very quickly, we'll see at least 50% of them already Israeli citizens.
Thank you, Eve. Afifa, thank you.
Sure.
Now we'll give Salim, if you can answer shortly. We have another question from Saeed Abu Zaki. We need to finish this panel. I received a comment from the organizer, so I am under threat. Salim, you are on silence. Salim, we can't hear you.
Okay, there's the question actually is, let's say, why we make this research. I think that researchers must seek only one thing, the truth. That's why they have to make research. I don't think that Egon can affect the policy of the Israeli government. I don't think that we can really change the society as we wish. We can change very little. So the research must be seeking to be objective anyway. But I have to say two things. One for the Golan Heights, because I know very much about the Golan Heights. The citizenship started to be very popular in the Golan Heights since 2022, and not because of the massacre in the Sweda. It's not, and there's no. Maybe it will be the relation between these things later on. Another thing very important, and now 26% of the Druzes are Israeli citizens. That's another thing about the Druze as Arabs. Let's say one fact: the Druze are Arabs. They speak Arabic, they dream in Arabic, they enjoy Arabic music. So there is a very little a community of the Druze that were affected of the policy of the 70th to create a new nation, Druze nation, which it's really not very successful, but they belong to the right-wing parties in the Druze community, and if you ask about identity, identity is something objective and something subjective. So subjective, you can identify yourself as you like, but objectively, Druze are part of the Arab population in Israel.
Thank you, Salim. There is a question from Saeed Abu Zaki. Please present your question because we need to conclude this panel.
Okay. عندي سؤالين. questions. One, أول سؤال لدكتور إيف عفيفي، وراح أكون صريح. أنا كباحث لبناني شعرت إنه هيدا المداخلة فيها كتير بروباغندا. كان كتير بفيد إنه تعطينا أرقام ليكون في موضوعية لهالطرح. يعني يمكن كل اللي عم تحكيه صح على 5% of the population, it's insignificant. So بتمنى إنه كان يكون لأنه قيم الطرح يكون مدعوم ب numbers, facts، ما في شيء، كله كان طرح. السؤال الثاني لدكتور سليم، كتير أنا بشكره، كانت كتير مفيدة المداخلة، فبسأله كيف فينا نحن هاي المعرفة المفيدة جدا نأمنها لدروز فلسطين ولدروز لبنان ولدروز سوريا، ليكون خيارهم بالتوجهات السياسية خيار موضوعي عقلاني. يعني في كتير انطباع بلبنان وبسوريا انه دروز فلسطين عايشين كتير حياة احسن من كتير سياسيا واجتماعيا احسن من دروز لبنان، احسن دروز بالذات بسوريا عم بسمعها كتير بالسويد. فكيف فينا نحن برأيك ان هيدي المعرفة الموضوعية تنتشر من شان يكون الخيار واعي اكثر وموضوعي اكثر؟
Okay, Dr. Eve,
Yeah.
can you please refer to the question shortly, please?
Yeah, no worries.
Although I am on your side because I have published an article about the Druze in the Golan, and I can say that I support your insights about the great shift among the Druze in the Golan.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So in terms of numbers, yeah, we do have numbers, and of course, because we needed to do just a 15-minute, I didn't want to overwhelm with everything. I have interviewed a total of 25 individuals, and not all of them are from the Golan. I had 10 from the Golan who are recruits. I had 5 from the Golan who were families of the recruits, and I asked them about how they perceive the whole thing, having their children or brothers, etc., serving, and how it shifted their perception of things. And the rest were Israeli Druze, and some of them were, as I said, military commanders, that I also asked them about the enlistment of the Golan Druze. So I got more statistics from them as well. And as I also said in my introduction, I also complemented these with media coverages. So I also looked at statistics from media articles that had more numbers. They, of course, because they collaborated with IDF spokesperson, so they had interviewed 71 recruits. So I combined all of these together to come up with this talk and the conclusions and the findings.
Salim, please.
Okay. I will answer in Arabic.
1 minute because we need to conclude the panel.
Okay, I will answer you in Arabic, please. شكرا على كلماتك، ولكن طبعا هناك الكثير. أولا النقطة المركزية التي يجب نأخذها في الحسبان سواء كان في سوريا أو في إسرائيل هو استعمال أدائي للطائفة الدرزية كأقلية حدود وكأقلية مستضعفة. الأمر الثاني، وهذا قلته في المحاضرة، لا يكفي السيطرة على السياسيين، والسيطرة على السياسيين هي تقريبا مطلقة في الطائفة الدرزية، وإنما يجب السيطرة أيضا على الديسكورس، على النقاش السياسي، والسيطرة على الأكاديمية، والسيطرة على التعليم. وكانت هناك محاولات لجنة بندور وغيرها، لا أريد أن أدخل في هذا الموضوع، التي حاولت أن تخلق الهوية الدرزية، وهذا الكلام الذي غير حقيقي، وكانت طبعا من وراءه منظمات الاستخبارات وإلى آخره. ولكن في نهاية المطاف وظيفة الأكاديمي هي أن يقوم ببحث موضوعي، وأن يضع الحقائق كما يراها وكما يعرفها بغض النظر عن الاستنتاجات. ولكن مهم جدا أن نعرف بأي مناخ نحن موجودين، وأن نعرف تماما أن نحن موجودين تحت عمليات بروباغندا قوية جدا من الجانب الإسرائيلي، وخصوصا من اليمين الإسرائيلي، للتلاعب بمستقبل الدروز في السويداء. ونحن نرى آثار هذا الموضوع المؤلمة جدا مع الأسف التي تحدث في السويداء حاليا.
شكرا أخي سليم. I would like to thank the speakers and also the audience for the question. Thank you and have a good evening. Thank you. Also, I repeat my Thanks to my friend Rami Zidan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Yusri Hazran. Thank you for this lovely discussion.